Welcome to the DePIN State presented by Eclipse. I'm Nick Hawks. On today's episode, we have Amy and Devon from the Web3 Working Group, super advocates for the DePIN space. This episode is sponsored by Eclipse Labs. Eclipse is building Ethereum's fastest layer 2 powered by the Solana virtual machine. Eclipse combines Solana's performance and scalability with Ethereum's security to get the best of both worlds. You can read more about Eclipse mainnet at eclipse.builders. We'll have a little bit more on them later in the show. Before we get started, remember to hit the like, subscribe, and smash that bell. This alerts you to when the next show drops and helps us bring great guests like Amy and Devon on the show. Guys, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Nice to meet you, Nick.
I'm psyched to have you guys here. Now, you guys are doing this really, really important work of what I think of as like DePIN advocacy. You know, the rest of us are really inward looking where it's like, oh, how do I do this new miner? How do I get in this new project? Or how do I set this thing up? And you guys are really outward facing and saying to the rest of the world, look, there's something here. You guys should pay attention. And maybe this is how we shape it. Can you walk me through kind of how you got into DePIN in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So Devon and I both have backgrounds in the entertainment industry. So almost 10 years ago now, Devon read the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, and was like, oh, this can be used for other things than, financial services. This could be used for, let's say, media distribution. And so he came up with some ideas for how we could build something for content distribution. It was one of the early, what was it, an Ethereum like Skype chat or something like that was where we first posted the idea. Like that's how long ago this was.
Ethereum forums. Yeah, we called it the Decentralized Library of Alexandria.
Yeah, and so we built a working, fully decentralized client. We used BitTorrent because IPFS didn't exist yet. That's how early this was. And we thought we had to get to this really fast because the idea was so obvious that if we didn't move quickly, somebody would beat us to it. And wow, we were so wrong.
Yeah, I remember the very first client, and I was worried because it didn't have any mechanism to like prevent piracy or anything like that. Like you could put up a full-length feature, and I was terrified the night before that suddenly like the pirate community was going to discover it and there's going to be all kinds of movies that couldn't be taken down. And it turned out we had exactly the
opposite problem. We had nobody that was interested in it. We were talking about this long before people were using terms like Web3 or infrastructure. So anyway, long story short, we kind of continued to build that protocol for many years and worked with people who were interested in it. The state of Wyoming, MENA's largest independent news outlet, just different people who were kind of at the cutting edge of exploring these ideas and had an interest in how blockchain and decentralized technology could be used beyond financial services. And so we did a bunch of test cases with them. And eventually we met several of the founders of different DePIN projects and found out that they were looking to put together a nonprofit organization to advocate for it because, it wasn't getting the attention it deserved, basically.
Yeah.
Things like DeFi were hogging all of the attention. And really, for most people, DePIN is going to have a much more profound and important impact on our day-to-day lives. And so that we were recruited into the role of founding this organization and, becoming advocates for the space. So it's been really fun.
Yeah. And it's super cool to see you guys do the work. I saw you on Bloomberg. Now you're on DePIN State, obviously moving up. So excited to see you guys rushing there. Let's see. Last year, you guys announced that was a Web3 Working Group, raised $2 million for crypto education. Like, can you give me an example of what you guys are using that for, or how that is being deployed?
Absolutely. So there are sort of three missions that we were given when we were recruited into this, and that was to elevate DePIN in terms of the public conversation. So that would be making sure that people understand that DePIN is sort of distinct from but adjacent to cryptocurrency, that it's not necessarily inside the cryptocurrency umbrella the way that most people think of it as financial services. And that would be in terms of, just the general public, but also really in particular, I think Web2 developers are really an important audience for us to help them to understand how these tools can be used so that they can build new things. Because right now we're sort of facing the problem of getting the infrastructure to the end user, right? There's like a lot of developer activity, but getting it to that last mile to the end user, that's the kind of next thing that we need to solve for. We've also been doing a tremendous amount of advocacy and education in terms of working with legislators, regulators, and their staff, because there's a lot of people who just need a basic understanding of what Web3 is and the different technologies involved, even starting with what is Bitcoin. So we have an entire What is Web3 video series that we've created. That's just a series of explainers. It's like if I was coming to this for the first time, 10 years ago when I got into this and it was all so foreign to me, what would I have wanted to watch? And so it's these quick videos that tell you like what is cryptography, what is blockchain, what just all of those kinds of things.
They try to bridge the gap between, we kept on hearing from staffers that when they'd go look for like what is public key cryptography, they would either get something that's so full of jargon that the industry uses that they would just be lost, or something that was so light that they wouldn't really have any understanding of it afterwards. And they certainly wouldn't know how to kind of craft legislation around it. So we wanted to include technical details without needing to already be a member of the industry to understand it.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. And then the last one is looking at, how we can help to solve shared technical problems in the industry. And what we've really come to understand in our last couple of years of running this organization is that has to do with creating a set of shared standards that we can all use to talk about these concepts in the same way. And an analogy we've been talking about there is, that DeFi, once it had a kind of a shared set of terms that different projects could use. So
TVL and stuff like that. Nothing that was ever like formally developed. It's just they started getting used by multiple platforms, and thus different users could hop from one platform to the other and still understand the space they're in.
And we don't really have that yet in the DePIN space because you kind of go into the rabbit hole of one project and you have a lot to learn. And so we need to look at how we can develop that as a sector.
Got it. Yeah, standards are going to be super, super important. I'm glad to see you guys focusing on it. Let's see, you might have a very different perspective on this than the rest of us who are really inside the space. What are some of the threats to DePIN that you guys are seeing, either internal or external?
Oh boy. On the regulatory front in the US, there are definitely some big challenges. The general just assumption that everything should be KYC AML. I mean, for one thing, let's be honest, that's unconstitutional. Fourth Amendment is here for a reason. But the problem with that kind of assumption and just applying it to these kind of things is that for these networks to work, they need to have machine-to-machine transactions that are coordinating things at high volume. And it just becomes untenable to keep track of that much stuff. Not to mention, there was also a proposal by the Treasury that if someone uses, say, a utility token, for lack of a better word, or in our specific case, DePIN tokens, to buy a service, they would have to, for their tax accounting, they would basically have to account for what the fair market value of that service was. So first they have to look up what the price of the token was when they bought it. Then they need to know what the price of the token is as they're using it. And then they need to know how much of a discount off of the fair market value for the service itself that they got by using that token. And in a couple of cases, that's hard but doable because there's a currently existing, service that does that, like AWS and stuff like that. But one of the great examples I like to use is Arweave, because there is no actual way to pay one time for something to be stored and for it to be stored for 200 years, perhaps forever. That doesn't exist. There is no analog. So it's just not even doable. You're breaking the law just to use these things. And that's a bad thing because the entire web industry, was built in the United States. So I think a lot of lawmakers in the US are making the mistake of thinking like, oh, well, we're so far ahead, or we're just so special in some particular way that this industry couldn't possibly offshore. And we're seeing that happen. Absolutely. It is happening. There's a lot of other countries that want to compete for this space that are making much more welcoming. They're taking on sandbox approaches, et cetera, where they're just saying, let's find out whether these laws are useful or not, and really encourage this industry to be adopted here, where in the US it's kind of opposite right now. And that's horrible.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The Treasury recommendations that Devon is talking about, everybody was just talking about those. I think there were between 120,000 and 150,000 comment letters that were submitted. The crypto industry really came together against this proposed set of recommendations.
Yeah.
And yet most people were focused on the fact that the kind of reporting that it was requiring was so onerous as to not work. But even if you accept that you accept the level of onerous reporting, you say like, okay, well, in spite of how tough this is, it is doable, and we could build some tools to automate it to make it reasonable. Well, no one was advocating for or making the case to say what Devon just said, which is that there are instances of Web3 protocols that simply would not be permitted in the US under those kinds of rules. And that's definitely the most serious danger. to DePIN at this time.
Because DePIN is the most, like Amy said, it's the most impactful on our daily lives. The fact that this video call involves video transcoding, that everything we do on the web involves data storage, that the emergence of AI depends on taggable databases of data itself, training data, on inference models that currently are somewhat closed, on actual GPU hardware that's really hard to get access to on these really centralized systems. DePIN solves for all those things. And because it's a public resource, it does so in a much more safe way. So, to all the AI doomers out there, DePIN is the solution to that. To everyone else, it's just going to make the web better.
Yeah. No, fascinating. The language does not yet describe kind of some of the problems that we're having. So interesting. All right, let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, Eclipse Labs. One of the cool parts about doing this show is we get to talk to tons of projects across the space, including back-end nerdy stuff that helps DePIN projects. One of those is today's show sponsor, Eclipse Labs. They are building Ethereum's fastest layer 2 to support several DePIN projects. Eclipse leverages the best parts of the modular stack, Solana for execution, Celestia for scalability, and Ethereum for security. Eclipse is committed to helping projects build on DePIN. Check them out at eclipse.builders and check out the interview we did with Neil at Eclipse if you haven't seen it yet. Okay. Can you guys talk a little bit, because I can see there's a passion of yours about user sovereignty and how it relates to DePIN?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Got like 30 seconds now.
I mean, it's basically at the root of all Web3. And thank God it's been held throughout everything else. In every single project, you have the ability to store your own keys. It's hard. And I would say the industry has not yet done a good enough job of figuring out how to do that in a way that most people are comfortable with. They end up on one side or the other, where they either have to completely trust the other side because they've been trained by the web for all this time to click the forgot your password button rather than have good password management skills. But the more and more examples we see of getting rugged because, not your keys, not your crypto, and everything else that kind of can apply to, if it means your entire history of content that you've created, et cetera, it gets rugged because you didn't keep your keys. I think people will take that more seriously. And I do think that there's going to be some great solutions that will continue to come along and make it actually viable, feasible.
I would just add to that by saying that Thanksgiving is tomorrow here in the States. And so we're all thinking about going home and talking to our families about crypto and what's going on in that regard, a lot of us anyway. And 10 years ago when we got into this, not just family, but people at conferences, at crypto conferences would laugh at us and say, the internet could never be censored. The web could never be censored. That's ridiculous, right? And now, my aunts are talking about how Facebook is listening to them and they want tools for privacy and they care about how they can protect themselves online and yet still participate in these kinds of, collective conversations that are happening online. And so really what big tech is doing by controlling so much of our data and being so, what's the right word?
Authoritarian?
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
That is really the fuel that is going to push people into Web3. And so as soon as we have some really user-friendly solutions like Devon is talking about that are still frankly needed in terms of the user experience and how you can have that sovereignty without the amount of risk that those of us who have been in this for 10 years have faced and who have all lost tokens and had, things go wrong. Once those are overcome, that fuel is just there's going to be a mass, exodus, or really it's kind of like a bridge, right? Because we'll always have Web 2 to some degree in the way that I feel like some people are still on Web 1. We'll always have Web 2, but there will be this way that you can, really own yourself.
Upgrade.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. Well, let's kind of finish on a high note here. You guys see a lot of what's going on. On Bloomberg, you had said that the DePIN is kind of going to be, I think I'm misquoting you here slightly, but the darling of the next cycle. Is there anything specific in this space that you guys are super pumped on and maybe that doesn't exist today that is well suited for DePIN?
Well, to some degree, I'm just pumped that it's really catching up. That a couple of years ago, there wasn't even that when we started this, there wasn't the term DePIN in the first place. And there was a lot of back and forth discussions about I was really advocating for Disco. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that Sammy's term DePIN caught on. It works well. But it's doing well. You know, we're at like a $30 billion market cap. That's past NFTs at this point. We're like half of DeFi's $65 billion market cap. And I think it's inspiring other projects to come along and fill in those gaps. And I think that the industry embraced its relationship with AI and helping to make AI more of a user-controlled open resource is really valuable. I'm super excited about the future. I think we're going in good places.
Yeah, I was going to say that AI is what I'm most excited about, because I think that AI really needs Web3 in order to be successful and in order to be safe. That the people that are worried about the safety of AI, the solutions to all of those fears are really available in Web3 technology when it comes to provenance of the information, when it comes to things like deepfakes, when it comes to control of your own content, and just all of the kinds of issues that AI brings up. DePIN has those solutions. Even for people who are working on building AI tools, there is access to the GPUs that they need in DePIN marketplaces. So I think that the intersection, I think that AI is going to propel Web3 forward, and that it's really time for that. You know, watching the industry grow at a snail's pace for what's felt like so long to me now, I think that we're going to make some real leaps forward, and that's super success. Exciting. Yeah. 10 years in the making.
10 years overnight success. Okay, it's going to be good. Cool. Well, a lot of founders watch this show. In fact, that's most of the folks who watch this. If they want to reach out to the Web3 Working Group, what are some of the services that you can provide for them on a project by project or more an industry basis? Kind of help me understand, or help them understand how you can help them.
Absolutely. So you can find us on all of the social platforms at Web3WG, also on our website, web3wg.org. And so those are the places to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you, to hear either what you need, what you feel like needs to be said to regulators. And also, if you're interested in helping us with the standards work that we're looking at doing, we would especially love to hear from you about that.
Yeah. Honestly, just to say about that, email was not a protocol. Email would never have been adopted if we were trying to integrate POP1 and IMAP and SMTP into different applications. It was the standardization of the concept of email wrapped around these protocols that allowed it to be adopted. We need exactly that for these kind of protocols right now.
Got it. Well, guys, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm super excited to have some kind of official advocates out there really helping work for DePIN and make this thing more of a reality than it already is. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Yeah, it was great talking with you. Thank you.